Streaming live via the internet. Welcome to ISP Radio, your weekly source for ISP-related news, events, and interviews with industry experts. If you deliver internet via fiber optic, wireless, coax, or any other way, you're in the right place. Chat live with us weekly via ispradio.com every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And now a brief word from our sponsors. Link Technologies, providing ISP consulting, support, and hardware for wireless ISPs. TowerCoverage.com, providing online RF coverage maps. Mimosa Networks, providing high-density, high-bandwidth radio products. Advanced LLC, providing retail and wholesale advanced communication services by matching providers with your bandwidth needs. And by Sitel, providing reliability in surge suppression. And now your host for ISP Radio, Steve Grabiel and Dennis Burgett.
Welcome to another edition of ISP Radio. I'm your host, Steve Grabiel, and I'm broadcasting from Moriarty, New Mexico, out in the middle of nowhere, the flyover country. And I got my co-host and producer of the show, Dennis, broadcasting from St. Louis, Missouri. And things have been going pretty well out here. We've been getting a ton of rain, almost like Texas, but not quite as bad. Just muddling through. Did upgrade this last week to a relay to tearing down equipment running off of LMR, which Dennis would probably be proud of me for doing. But we put up a Ubiquity point-to-point AC product and went from about 50 megs of capacity on that pipe to serving that relay to about 200 megs. So hopefully we freed up a lot of congestion, and by doing that, highly suggest you guys do that if you're not already doing it. News on the front, Dennis last week talked about you can sign up for Wispalooza. I went on the site, and it's a really good value if you sign up now. And matter of fact, I was able to get a Southwest airline ticket for $99 one way. So by ordering it, getting signed up with Wispalooza early and that deal, I'm pretty much almost at break even if I wait till the very last minute. Well, with that, Dennis, you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You got any good news out there?
Yeah, there's a couple things that occurred this past week. Nothing too horrible, but nothing too awesome. First off, as you said, Wispapalooza is open. Registration October 10th through the 17th. They do have the Fiber Weekend. That agenda has not been posted yet, but it is coming soon. But they are starting to work on the Wispapalooza agenda. Lots of great stuff. The main event is October 13th through 15th. Visit wispa.org. You can register right online, get that done. And as I said last week, it is cheaper if you pre-register. In other words, if you register before certain dates, and I believe the pre-registration is before July 12th. You save quite a bit of money if you pre-register, so I highly recommend that you do so as quickly as possible. Also, news on the WISPA front. The WISPA nominees for the new board of directors, or I should rephrase that, for the outgoing and incoming board of directors, will be announced on Friday, so be sure you check that out. I believe there is a 4-week campaign period that they can campaign, and you can see all of the information that they submitted. Make sure you look at that. The big news here is really the D.C. Court of Appeals denied the request to stay the effective date of the new open internet rules. WISPA and other petitioners had sought to suspend the application of the rules pending a decision by the court on the merits of the Title II actions, etc. So, therefore, the court disagreed with this, and at this point in time, we, as internet providers, are under the Title II jurisdiction. We are considered common carriers or public utilities, whatever you want to call those types of things. All the good, bad, and ugly that goes with it. So it is now in effect, just so everybody knows. Don't forget also October 1st is also the second deadline per year for your Form 477 filing deadline for the FCC. So you should be looking at getting that going, or put that on your calendar at least, so that you know that you have to submit that. That is a required form. All ISPs and WISP will need to file that. Again, the October 1st is that deadline. With that, other than, as Steve said, rain here in St. Louis, we are getting remnants of this wonderful tropical depression or whatever they call it. And it has been raining here for, I don't know, 40 days and 40 nights, it seems like. Lots of rain, and what was it, Tropical Storm Bill. We actually are planning, the news guys are just all over this, because tomorrow, Thursday, they're saying that the actual tropical storm, which is currently in like Oklahoma and northern Texas, will actually be over Missouri and even over St. Louis. We're expecting absolutely huge amounts of rain. At the beginning of this, prior to Monday, we had 6 inches of rain in this month. We're going to add another 6 inches, they said, by Friday.
Jeez.
So, lots of rain.
Missouri's green anyways, but out here in the desert where it's parched, it's really greened up here. When I left for vacation and came back, it was like night and day. I got to get out my weed whacker and whack weeds around my office, make it look respectable, you know?
Oh, yeah, you actually have to cut grass. See, we cut grass weekly. Because if you don't cut grass weekly, then that means you have to brush hog after that. Mm-hmm. You know, that's how much water and grass we get here. So
the lawn people make out like thieves there.
Oh yeah, they've been making really good money.
One thing I want to throw out there is Dennis, after last show, got us a dial-in number, and it's 636-707-0074. If there's anyone out there that'd like to call in and talk with us on the show live. And we did trial it last week, and it worked like a charm. So if you're interested in calling in to talk with our guest, be welcome to do that. Again, that's 636-707-0074. And that leads me into our guest today. Today we have the CIO of ARIN, Richard Jimmerson. He so kindly we solicited him, and he decided to come on the show to talk about all things IPv4 and IPv6 and what's going on with ARIN in that realm. Richard, you there?
I am. How you doing, Steve?
Well, I'm going to preface this. I'm doing great. I'm going to preface this as I'm kind of dumb in this kind of realm, and Dennis is the guru here, and I'll just interject stuff from a dummy level, from what I understand, when appropriate. But I'm going to just turn this over to Dennis and you, Richard, to talk about all things ARIN. So go ahead, guys.
Excellent. Well, Richard, let's just start here. ARIN, this is the American Registry for Internet Numbers. Can you just tell all of our listeners what you guys actually do and what your responsibilities are and how much money you make on it, right?
Well, sure. ARIN is a nonprofit organization. We are the American Registry for Internet Numbers. What we do is manage the distribution of all of the IP address space and autonomous system numbers for Canada, United States, North Atlantic Islands, and the Caribbean, a large portion of the Caribbean. We've been in operation since December of 1997. We're the successor registry to Network Solutions. And we have a community-based system where the community at large comes together and they create the policies that dictate how the ARIN organization staff will manage the distribution of all of the IPv4, IPv6 address space and autonomous system numbers.
Beautiful. So anytime you need an actual IP address or IP block of IPs, I should rephrase that, and you need to get it you can't get it from your provider. Hopefully you qualify. There's, of course, qualifications that you have to qualify for IP space, but you would go to ARIN to get that. So if you are interested in going IPv6, my network already is. Many of my customers' networks are already moving to that or already have moved to that. Very important that you start looking at that. We're going to talk about that and the reason why here in a little bit. But ARIN's the one you're going to go to and say, hey, I have a need for IPv6 IP addresses. I want to give public IPs to my customers. What do I need? And the first thing you're probably going to need is you're typically going to get an AS number. Once you get that, then you will be able to qualify or hopefully qualify for your IPv6 space. So let's talk about IPv6. We know it's coming. We know more and more people are deploying it. How hard is it for a small provider? So I'm just going to give you an example. A provider with, say, 1 to 500 meg of bandwidth total. Okay, maybe one or more internet feeds. Some have one, some have more. And they are wanting to get into the IPv6 bandwagon, assuming that one or more of their providers supports them in IPv6. What is the process that they need to do, and what is their expected cost, as well as what do they have to have in general? I know there's a big list of rules, but in general that they need to do to get IPv6 space.
Right, and you threw out their, before you start, Richard, you threw out their qualifications. Like Dennis said, you get an AS number. If you could go into qualifications, I think that would be helpful as well.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. So if an organization is a service provider and they want to request IPv6 address space from ARIN, as you indicated, one of the criteria that they could meet to get that address space directly from ARIN is immediately becoming multi-homed. To use a requested block for multi-homing purposes. So if an organization has a publicly registered AS number and they are multi-homed, they would immediately qualify for IPv6 address space directly from ARIN. The Internet policy community has done a really good job of making the policies very liberal to make it easier for Internet service providers to come in and get the IPv6 address space they need. So if you are multi-homed and you're going to use your IPv6 address space for that purpose and providing services to your customers, you would be able to qualify for that way. That's one way you could qualify. Another way that an ISP or a service provider could qualify for IPv4 or 6 address space directly from ARIN is already having a block of IPv4 address space in the registry. So if you've already received IPv4 from ARIN or from previously network solutions, you would immediately qualify for an IPv6 address block directly from ARIN. And a third way that they could qualify is if they have a reasonable plan to make at least 50 assignments to other organizations of IPv6 address space over the next 5 years, they could qualify that way. It really is, the bar is really low in regards to the policy and the qualification criteria for IPv6 address space directly from ARIN for Internet service providers. And you did talk about the fees. The smallest block of IPv6 address space that ARIN is allowed to issue to a service provider in accordance with policy is a /36. A /36, a fee for a /36 is $1,000 from the registry. Organizations would also be able to qualify for a /32. These are rather large blocks of IPv6 address space that they would be able to use going forward into the future to provide services to their customers.
So how large is this /36?
/36 is very large. With a /36, an organization is going to be able to service thousands and thousands of customers. The Internet community has made some decisions over the years about what size typically that they would assign down to their customers, and the size that they would assign to customers is typically a /48 or in some cases a /56, depending on what it is. But a single subnet is a /64, which is even smaller. So no one would be assigned anything smaller than a /64. But let's say that an internet service provider decided that they were going to assign by default /48s to all customers, and that is allowed by policy, by the way. If they did that with a /36, they have enough IPv6 address space to assign 4,096 /48s. If they decided that they wanted to use /56s instead, and that could be an appropriately sized block to give to your customers, they would have over 1 million of those inside of a /36 to service their customers.
So definitely big.
Yes, very big.
You know, I think the idea was whenever IPv4 came out, it was, hey, let's make it so big we never think we could possibly ever use it. And then we used it. And now whenever they did IPv6, they go, okay, let's make this so big that we don't think we could ever possibly use it. And then let's take that and times it by another 65,000 or so times, just for good measure.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, if you hear the story from one of the co-inventors of the protocol, Vint Cerf, I've heard him say that IPv4 is an experiment that escaped the lab. It was never intended for a global commercial internet like we have today. At the time that the IPv4 protocol was created, it was intended for United States government, research organizations, for testing purposes largely, and experimentation. And the network became so popular and it started to escape those places and actually become commercially used that it blossomed into the internet that we have today. And back in the early 1990s, the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the organization that's responsible, the standards body for the protocols, understood that wow, the commercial internet is taking off. IPv4 is never going to satisfy the needs of a global commercial internet into the far distant future. So they immediately started working on the next generation protocol, which ended up being IP version 6. They worked on that through the 90s, and in 1999 they deployed that into production, and the registries like ARIN started issuing their first blocks of IPv6 address space to customers. IPv6 was specifically designed for a global commercial internet with many, many devices on them. And in fact, the way that they designed the protocol, let's step back real quick and look at IPv4. IPv4 is specifically designed to number hosts. And you're counting host addresses when you're trying to determine the size prefix that you would give to a network segment or to another customer. IPv6 was designed in a way so that the hosts were no longer the majority of the concern. The concern was at the subnet level. So what they did is they created a model so that a single subnet, default subnet size, the smallest one even, a /64, could number billions of hosts, and hosts would no longer be a concern. So that's basically the difference between IPv4 and IPv6, is that with IPv6, hosts really don't matter. What really matters and what you're counting are the number of subnets that you need for customers.
Gotcha. And we've deployed plenty of customers out there with IPv6. It definitely works. If you go to my website, the linktext.net or tirecoverage.com, any of those are all going to be IPv6 enabled already. And we find most of your major commercial applications out there, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Hulu, Netflix, all those guys, they are already running v6. So it's not like it's not out there. It's definitely being used, and the global internet IPv6 tables definitely been increasing exponentially month, year by year. So it's definitely important for everybody to understand that it is coming, and you really need to get on it. If especially as a smaller provider, you are almost, how can I put this? You are in a better position to be able to change your technology or upgrade your technology quicker than the big guys. And because of that, you have an edge. You can deploy v6 before most of your competition in some cases. So it's very, very important that you start looking at that. Now, when we go back to the importance of v6, we're going to talk about the IPv4 depletion. Can you give us a little insight? Where are we at today in IPv4 depletion?
Dennis, it's very interesting, the timing of this radio program. Since we had arranged this some time ago to work together on this, and it just so happens that today, as we're on the telephone, we are only weeks away from the very first time in the history of the IPv4 address space of receiving a request from an IPv4 customer asking for IPv4 address space, having them qualify for that in accordance with the policies, and having to go back to them and let them know that we do not have that size block left remaining in the IPv4 free pool inventory. That will happen for the first time in the history of IPv4 inside this region, probably within the next few weeks. So that's happening very soon. So when that happens, organizations will get a message from us, and it will say, you have qualified for a specific block size. That block size is not available in the IPv4 free pool inventory. However, what we've done is we've taken the next larger, or the next block size that is available, the largest block size that is available that you have qualified for that falls under that. And we've held that in reserve for you. You can elect to either take that to satisfy your request, or you can elect to go on a waiting list for the block size that you qualified for. And in the case that ARIN was ever to receive that address space back into the free pool, and you were next in line on the waiting list, you may get that block size. So organizations are going to be faced with that decision for the very first time here in the coming weeks.
So all of a sudden, you are requesting blocks, and you qualify for the blocks, but you can't get them.
Correct. That will happen for the first time in the history of IPv4 in the ARIN region in the next couple of weeks.
Gotcha. So next few weeks. Now, what happens if an ISP who qualifies and can't get those blocks? I mean, do they just stop deploying internet? Or what do we see most people doing?
Well, there are a lot of different things that people are doing in preparation for IPv4 depletion. Before I go into the things that you can do with IPv4, I'll plug IPv6 again. Everyone needs to be thinking about what they're going to be doing with their v6 deployments if they haven't started yet. It is very critical that they get to work on their v6 deployments. The IPv6 protocol is the future of the Internet. However, not everyone has deployed IPv6. We will use IPv4 for a very long time. So if you're adding IPv6, what you're doing is exactly that. You're adding IPv6 connectivity. You're not dropping IPv4 necessarily. So you're going to run them alongside each other in a dual stack manner. So with v4, there are a lot of things that you can do. So the first thing that people are going to look at doing with IPv4 depletion is making stretched or extended use out of what they already have. So right now, where you might statically assign IPv4 addresses to certain customers, in the future you might dynamically assign those, or you might share them across several customers using an additional layer of network address translation. So a lot of providers are going to be doing what amounts to carrier-grade NAT and stretching the use of their IPv4 that way. There are ways that you can continue to get IPv4 address space post ARIN IPv4 free pool depletion too. So for instance, there are policies that allows ARIN to transfer IPv4 address space from one organization to another organization. So if you're an organization that has more IPv4 address space than you need, you may have gotten this in the 1990s, or may have gotten it recently, and you would like to supply that to another organization, you could work out an agreement, an arrangement with that other organization to do that, and then you can come to ARIN and actually transfer that IPv4 address space from one organization to another. Our community created policies that allowed that many years ago, and it's already started to be used. People are doing it today, and we expect it to be done a lot more in the coming months after we deplete the ARIN IPv4 free pool.
Do you is there a lot of assigned IP space out there that is simply not in use?
There's probably a good portion of IPv4 address space, particularly in some of the old historical registrations that happened in the early days of the Internet, that are largely unused. So if you look at something that has been registered by ARIN in the last 10 years, a good portion of that IPv4 address space is used to its fullest extent possible. I mean, you have service providers that have come in. They use this to grow their networks and bring on new customers on a daily basis. They're using that IPv4 address space. If you look at some of the registrations that happened back in the days of Network Solutions or SRI, or in the older days, back in the late 80s, early 1990s, a lot of those registrations that exist in the database probably are not fully utilized. We expect what we're going to see is a lot of that IPv4 address space being subject of a transfer in the coming months to the coming years, and it will find its way into the hands of an organization that will put it into full utilization.
And obviously, ARIN handles the transfers, things like that. I do know plenty of people are trying to lease their space as well. So, will you? I guess we get the question, or I get this question quite often. You know, will I be able to get, once the depletion is done? Will I still be able to get IPs? In most cases, the answer I'm going to say is probably yes. However, you're going to pay for it, and you're probably going to pay significantly more than the fee schedule that ARIN would have. A /22 or smaller block from ARIN is what, $500 a year?
Yes.
And I believe that most of these organizations, and do not quote me, and I know ARIN can't quote anything because ARIN doesn't sell them, but I know a lot of these organizations, one customer of mine actually recently rented 2 /24s, but it was $2,400 per year per /24 to lease those IPs from another provider. So whenever we look at, hey, a /22 being, 4 /24s and it's $500, and now all of a sudden we're up at $2,400 per /24, that's almost $9,600 per year versus the $500 ARIN fees. So what's going to happen is we're definitely going to see lots of people that are either going to be leasing or buying, which is fine, and then ARIN will do those transfers for the purchases as normal. But we are going to see people paying more.
Yeah, there's going to definitely be a situation where if people do choose to go to the market, that there will likely be financial transactions involved between them and the organization that's supplying the IPv4 address space to them in the market. ARIN does not become involved in that financial transaction in any way. As an organization, we do not even want to be aware of the details of those transactions. So what we're simply doing as a matter of transferring the address space is making sure that the organization who is supplying the IPv4 addresses, the source organization, is the proper organization and individual set to assert their authority over that address space. So we do very careful and meticulous checking to make sure the person who is presenting the address space is authoritative over that IPv4 address space. And then on the recipient side, the organization that will receive the IPv4 address space, we're working with them to make sure that they're compliant with the policy set by the community to receive that IPv4 address space. There is still a needs-based aspect to it, whereas today we're looking at a 3-month projection of someone's need. Under the transfers, they're allowed a 24 months need assessment, which is much larger and much more generous to them. So ARIN is looking after those elements of the transfer, and we're making sure that the legal documentation is there and everything is set up properly. I did want to add one more thing, Dennis. After we do deplete the IPv4 free pool at ARIN, the policy community has set aside a /10 of IPv4 address space that is specifically intended for organizations that need a small block of IPv4 address space to help them with their IPv6 transitions. So, for instance, if the v4 free pool depletes, and you're an internet service provider, a wireless internet service provider, and you are deploying IPv6, and you just need some IPv4 address space to help get you by for translation services that you might be doing between your IPv6 network and the IPv4 internet, or for your DNS for IPv4, you can still come and get that from ARIN. So we have a /10 set aside. An organization may come into ARIN and request up to a /24 of IPv4 address space if they're involved in an IPv6 deployment, and we will allocate or assign that address space to them. Each organization can take from that pool one time every 6 months if they justify it.
And all these policies are obviously well documented on the ARIN website.
Yes, they are. The policies are created by the Internet community at large. Any one of you that are listening today on the show can participate in the process by which the policies are created. It's called the ARIN Number Resource Policy Manual. You can find that straight from the ARIN.net website. This is the policy set that the ARIN staff uses to implement policies set by the community. The only people who can't participate in the policy development process are the ARIN staff themselves, because we are the group of people who do implement those policies on your behalf.
Yeah, so there's nothing, how can I put it, nothing hidden here.
No.
It's all out in the open. Everybody, if you want V6 or V4 space, come get it. And I actually want to toss this out there because I do get a lot of organizations that are smaller that have a single 100 or 500 meg feed, and that's it. That's all they have. But their provider is either... in one case, I know one provider wanted almost $4,000 for a /24, and they wouldn't route it to them. They would only put it on their interface, which was insane. But besides that, the problem in this particular instance is that a lot of WISPs serve a lot of underserved areas in the U.S., and they have a hard time getting these resources, specifically V4 and V6 addressing, mainly because either their provider doesn't have it, or their provider, if they do have it, they are charging for it. And the reason why the reason why they can do that is because they don't have an option for a different provider because of where they're at, their physical location in the underserved area. So a company like that, let's say that their upstream will talk V6 to them. But they don't want to get a V6 block from their provider, or their provider don't want to give them that. You said as long as they were assigned a block before, which in this case they wouldn't be, or they had some type of special routing need, so multi-homed, which in this case unfortunately they would not be as well. Was there any other ways they can get that V6 address?
Yes, there's one other criteria for a service provider. If they have a reasonable plan to make 50 assignments to other organizations within 5 years, they could also qualify directly from ARIN.
What is an organization?
Mm-hmm. So are you speaking like an end user enterprise organization?
I have a WISP that has 500 users, and they want to deploy v6 to all the users if the users wish to have devices that are capable. Would that qualify?
It would qualify.
Okay. So as long as you have a deployment plan, then even if you're then you should, as long as you have a deployment plan to deploy up to at least 50 subscribers, they should be able to,
within 5 years.
Within 5 years, which I don't think.
That's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just going to give you this. So this past year, I was at the Microtech user meeting down in Florida, and I did a presentation on IPv6 deployment. And that IPv6 deployment was 64 sites. Each site had a /56, so that was 256 /64s per site. And then if the consumer, in this case the network was all PPoE, so if the consumer PPoE client requested a /64 or requested a block, we would automatically assign them that. And we rolled that network out, other than some pre-work, that entire network of 64 sites, we rolled out between 9 a.m. and noon in one day. And had all those assignments assigned out to the networks. We had the prefix delegation running, and all we had to do, and we actually bumped all the PPoE sessions, so whenever they were ready, if they already had capable gear, they got an IPv6 assignment. So it is actually not that hard to deploy v6, especially with a lot of the WISP gear that we have. We are actually, again, more prepared for IPv6 than a lot of other companies that may have to do a lot more router reboots or have a lot more legacy gear as well. Mm-hmm. So just saying, it's not as difficult as people think. It's still routing. It's not overly complicated. It's just a bigger number, and letters are okay. So I know a lot of people get scared. Well, what's that letter thing in my IP address? And they kind of get all freaked out about it. I don't know why, but it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of people are a little bit concerned about the hexadecimal numbering in IPv6 address. And I think that there's a lot of resources out there to help network engineers, systems administrators. If they're being introduced for IPv6 to IPv6 for the very first time, you can go out and find those. You can find them on the ARIN.net website. We've got a resource called getipv6.info. Internet Society has some resources. There are a lot of free-to-use resources out there that can help you get on board with how to use IPv6. And if you've got a larger deployment that you need to do, and you don't want to rely on your fresh start with IPv6, and you want the advice of someone else, I'm sure that there are a lot of organizations out there that would be happy to consult with you to help you out as well.
Gotcha. So what other major issues do we see with IPv4? Obviously, the depletion is there. You had mentioned, and let's just do this one. You had mentioned that we had plenty of, how can I put, again, I'm trying to go back to what you said. When we get depleted, okay, we're going to be running v4 for a long time.
Yes.
What is a long time? 5 years? 20 years?
It depends on who you ask. It's at least the next 5 years, probably more than 10 years. Some people say that their career will end before we take IPv4 off the Internet, and they're probably right. There will come a time where there's a tipping point in the future. I can't tell you exactly when that's going to be. It's really up to you. It's really up to the operators on the Internet to decide when this is, where IPv6 is the dominant protocol over IPv4 on the Internet. We're not there yet, but we will be there in the coming years. Some people think it'll happen in 5 years. Some people think it'll happen in 10 years. It just really depends on the metrics that you're following and what the providers and the operators around the globe decide to do. If you take a look at some of the metrics that are out there right now, where are we today with IPv6? One of the organizations that does actually track IPv4 versus IPv6 traffic coming into their services is Google. And in the United States right now, they're showing IPv6 adoption at about 18.49%.
So not a whole lot, but it's getting there. It's getting better. That's
a much larger number than where we were just about 4 or 5 years ago. 4 4 or 5 years ago, it was measuring at under 1%, and now it's actually gone up there with Google. Some other providers are tracking these types of things too, and it's not got that high with them. But if you look at some of the national providers out there that number a lot of the residences, some of them have been very public about their deployments. One that's been very public and very outspoken about their V6 deployment is Comcast. And they have dual-stacked millions of customers across the United States. And there are people who are IPv6 capable and actually using IPv6 today that they're not even aware of it.
Yeah. We find that most devices nowadays are going to have IPv6. There's still legacy devices, some especially some less expensive gear. I'll just use that, as the word. That there's still some, stuff from China that is just very inexpensive, and they have no plans or does not talk IPv6 at all. But pretty much anything, my Android phone, pretty much your Apple phones, all your game consoles nowadays, anything new anyway. I even think my Xbox 360 is V6 enabled already. So it's out there. We just need to keep launching it. We just need to keep growing it. And keep going. And the big word here for people that are listening here is that ARIN is going to be turning people away in the next few weeks, even though they qualify for IPv4 addresses. That's how small of a pool that they have. Okay? And because of that, you are not, even if you qualify to get IPs, you are not going to be able to get V4 IPs. So you're going to have to start doing carrier-grade NAT. You're going to have to start doing other things to get people to the V4 internet. Or, I should rephrase that, you really need to be looking at deploying your V6 topologies out there, get the V6 to the customers, and then handle it from there. Because that way you can get those publics. Because we're going to start seeing. So what are some of the problems with carrier-grade NAT? This is actually a really good question. Richard, do you want to take that one?
Well, I can only tell you what I've heard from other organizations who have begun working with it. So, of course, a lot of the larger providers have experimented with carrier-grade NAT over the years, and wireless providers have been doing it for a very, very long time because they ran into a problem with availability of IPv4 addresses for handsets before we did on the wireline networks. And what they found is they do run into some issues. There may be increased latency for certain types of services. They're not outright reporting breakages or anything like that. It's just that customers for the first time might actually start to experience or notice a difference in the network quality based on the amount of latency that's in the network. Anytime that you take additional devices and you have to put them between a host and a client on the other end, it's going to add some latency. It's some additional overhead. But I know that large providers are using carrier-grade NAT, some of them already. So you may be using it you may be going through carrier-grade NATs right now and you just don't know it, or they will be very soon. And it's just a simple reality. It's something that they're going to have to do to stretch the lifetime of the IPv4 address space that they do have until the flip gets switched or the switch gets flipped and everybody's going to V6 one day and they have to worry about that less and less. But like we said, that could be 5-10 years away. We don't know how long that's going to take.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that we're going to be running V4 and V6 for a long time. Dual stack is here. It's going to be here to stay. Definitely people need to get into the V6 world. And there are plenty of resources. There are plenty of information. There's plenty of information. And as he just said, if you really don't have your own V6 address block already, and you're an ISP, then you really don't have a reason not to. You really need to get it. You really need to start making that plan to deploy it so that you can get it to ARIN, so that ARIN can get you a V6 block, and you can to run with it.
Dennis, I got a question.
Shoot.
So this is from a ISP's perspective here that doesn't know a whole lot about ARIN and transition. You talked about this, and I'm glad that Richard came on the show, and you talked about doing the deployment, and I threw out there, I run a double-natted network, and I know you laugh at me for that, Dennis, but that's the reality of it. Part of my question, and this is to Dennis, is So say I've got some Ubiquity client radios and stuff, Nano Station 2s out in the field. I know those are legacy gear, but they still work and they work fine. Is it a hardware issue or is it a software upgrade that allows some of these legacy devices to come up and run?
Most of it's going to be just software. And also keep this in mind is that even if you have bridges, so a lot of your Ubiquity gear is going to be bridges, the bridges are going to pass V6 through it, okay? What it's not going to do is it's not going to be managed via V6. Okay.
Right. So it'll be part of the dual stack idea?
Right. So that's why you have the dual stack. So your management may still be on your private 10 dots or your private V4 addresses, and they may never offer a software upgrade that adds V6 stack to that device. But most of your bridges are not going to just simply not pass V6 packets.
Yeah, bridges don't care.
Yeah, well, I say that. There are products that, if it doesn't know about that protocol, I've seen some weird radios do some weird stuff, and that would include, hey, I don't know what an IPv6 packet is, so I'm just going to drop it. I'm just going to not pass it. But most of them will just pass the entire frame, and everybody's fine regardless of what's in it. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. In your case, what you're going to really be focusing on, phase one would be rolling out IPv6 to the network routers and the network devices that you have, mainly to be able to get that IP space to your customers. Your private management stuff, that isn't a big deal. You can still run that on V4 for years to come because you're using private V4 and you have plenty of that.
Yeah.
Then the next phase is rolling out the actual V6 addresses in some shape or fashion to your end users. And whenever we look at ARIN and we look at the high level, a lot of these guys, they're assigning larger blocks, as he was saying, to organizations that probably don't need it. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. That's up to you and them to work out how many /64s do you really need. But in most of our deployments that we do, we would assign a /64 right on our interface from the router to the customers, and then we assign a individual /64s, so we do prefix delegation, to any device that requests a prefix, an IPv6 prefix. And what we normally see, especially in home and even small business users, is that they're not running multiple LANs. They only have one network on the inside of their home or business. And a single /64 is just like having a /24 in V4. That /64 is more than enough IPs for them. Now, the other aspect of this is actually a security aspect of running V6, is that now all of these devices are getting full-blown public IPv6 public IPs. They're directly accessible. So whenever we look at that, we also may need to look into, hey, do we need to implement some type of customer security on that? And, of course, now you get into, by you blocking inbound ports or something like that, now you get into the whole net neutrality / Title II issue that you're going to come into with doing so. We document that in our network. We tell it's in our terms of services that by default our V6 block inbound new connections are blocked, but outbound you can do whatever you want. We don't want you really running a web server on your V6 addresses unless you're paying for a business account to have that unblocked. And if someone said, well, I just want a V6 address for my security camera, we would unblock it. It's not a big deal. But it is a security concern because a lot of people assume that their router is their firewall and NAT is security. And obviously that's not really a good statement, but a lot of people do that. They just assume, hey, I have NAT, so it's going to hit my router, and it's going to stop right there, and that's it. But with V6, you're not giving them NAT. They have public IPs, and think of all the printers out there. I mean, I remember a long time ago when we would find HP LaserJet printers on public IPs. And then you go, okay, well, let me just print something to it, and you send some obscene thing to the printer, or tell it to print 5,000 pages or something just to screw with them. But that's the exact thing that could occur with IPv6. So from a ISP standpoint, not only can you offer the V6 services, but you can also offer to secure the V6 services, and that could be an additional fee. And everybody's all about getting the add-ons to your business. And IPv6 security or firewalling could definitely be something that you can do.
All right. Well, now here's a question for Richard. All right, Richard, I'm a small ISP. You heard double natted, and I have one provider, and he gives me a /24, and that's plenty for what I have to do. And I've been talking to Dennis about this. I cannot afford to multi-home. That'd be another provider I'd have to add to the thing. And your comment about saying that I will deploy 50 clients is that what it is? It's 50 clients. So if I go IPv6 and you guys allocate that and I say I'll do the 50 clients, what I would end up doing is I'd do my whole darn network, which would be 500. So that would meet that criteria, right?
It would meet that criteria. And just so that you know, if you're an ISP and you're already using a /24 from your upstream provider right now, you could qualify for a /24 directly from ARIN today. We still have /24s remaining in our inventory of IPv4 address space. The policy was changed several months ago that allowed us to issue all the way down to a /24 to organizations. So if you're an ISP and you're using a 24, you can get a 24 directly from ARIN, and we still have those available in the inventory today. When it comes to IPv6 address space, yes, if you've got 500 clients that you plan to number in the next 5 years, that certainly does meet the criteria of having at least 50, so you would meet the criteria for an IPv6 block directly from ARIN. Even after the IPv4 free pool depletes at ARIN, if you are deploying IPv6 and you need a /24 of IPv4 address space, you can still get that because we have that /10 reserved for that specific purpose.
So in reality, I would keep my current /24 from my provider and do what your guys are saying is a dual stack, but just start deploying V6 across the same network?
Yep.
That's where it gets confusing for me.
You can either keep the 24 that you have from your upstream provider and get IPv6 directly from ARIN and use provider-based v4 space and your own directly registered IPv6 address space, or if you meet the criteria, and it sounds like you might, in the scenario that you described, you can get your IPv4 address space directly from ARIN while it's still here, and use your own /24 directly from ARIN for IPv4 and have your own IPv6 address space as well.
And Steve, you don't have your own AS yet, correct?
I'm not sure if I do or not. I think I might have set that up, but I have to just check.
Okay. And just a quick question: do they have to have a AS to qualify for the V6?
No, they do not.
Okay.
So for the V6 address space, if you're coming in as an internet service provider to request IPv6 directly from ARIN, you have to meet one of those three primary criteria, and one of them is previously receiving IPv4 from the registry. The second one is multi-homing. And then the third one is reasonable plan to make 50 assignments to other organizations within 5 years. They only have to meet one of those criteria, and if they do, they can get their IPv6 address space directly from ARIN as an ISP.
There is no reason, almost every ISP that I would work with, there is no reason for them not to be able to get their own IPv6 space from ARIN very quickly, because all these guys, really all they need to do is enable IPv6 on their devices and start rolling it out to their customers, and it's not that difficult to do. They just have to do it. If a ISP, and you said the smallest block for a IPv6 allocation that ARIN would give would be a 36?
A /36 is the smallest allocation size we can make to an ISP, correct?
And that's a whole bunch of IPs, right?
Oh yeah.
That's a lot of address space. If you're talking about how many /64s are in a /36, it's right at about 268 million of them. If you're assigning /56s out of your 36, it's just over 1 million.
Yeah, so the answer to you is normally in the consumer space, you're probably going to be assigning /64s. Okay? So if you get a /36, you will have 256 plus million /64s to assign.
Wow.
So
No reason not to convert, guys.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Other than fear of not knowing how to do it, and that's where Dennis comes to the plate.
Yeah.
And Dennis and Stephen, I just wanted to state that it is up to the operator to decide what size prefix they assign down to their consumer customers or to their business customers. But I do want to make it very clear that policy that was passed by the Internet community allows, in a default case, even to a consumer, for you to assign a /48. So you can do a 48, you can do a 56, you can do a 64. It's up to you as an operator to decide which size that you want to assign to your customers. However, policy does allow you to go all the way up to a /48 for a customer.
Gotcha. And see, I would not, whenever I look at /48, that's 64,000 /64s. So I sit there and I look at, I have grandma, in her house. She has a computer and a cell phone, and maybe an internet connected TV, Netflix or something, and that's about it. So I don't see any reason to assign more than a /64 to that type of customer. I would much rather hold on to that. I hate to sit there and say this. Back whenever the internet or IPv4 first started, as he was saying, was that there was some definite blocks that were given out in the early days of IPv4 that was given out to organizations, very large blocks, /8s, etc., that was given to these organizations not thinking that we would ever deplete this. And those types of large blocks are still out there. They're still allocated, but probably most of them are probably not in use. And because of that, that's one of those. That's a lot of people say that these people should be the ones that should give this back to help the internet community, or
they're
they should
just
be
squatting on the space.
Yeah, because they're basically just squatting on it, if you want to use that word. But they were originally allocated it, so I'm sure Aaron has a comment on that one.
Yeah, some organizations have actually returned their old Class A's. So back in the early days of assignment of IPv4 address space, before it was realized that we would have this enormous global communications infrastructure that is the Internet today, it seemed acceptable to assign a Class A to an organization because what the network was intended for was different in those days than it is today. So like I said, IPv4 wasn't intended to number a global Internet, a global commercial Internet. So organizations did receive Class A's, what are /8s, what we call /8s insider, and some of those organizations have actually come back and returned them to the system. So for instance, there was a large organization that ran conferences that returned a /8 to the system about 5-6 years ago. Before that, there was a university that returned one of their old Class A's to the system. And when that address space of that size comes back to the registries, what we've done is we've given it back up to the IANA, the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, and then the IANA would then distribute that IPv4 address space back down to the 5 regional Internet registries, ARIN being one of 5, over time. And so that has happened. However, inside the ARIN community and inside the other regional Internet registry communities, the policy communities had a decision point that they needed to get past. And that was probably around 2007 to 2009, where they were discussing the imminent depletion of the IPv4 free pool, and they were either going to create policies that allowed organizations to transfer unused portions of their resources to other organizations, or they were going to ask the registry system to aggressively go after organizations that have underutilized blocks and to reclaim them. And the policy community decided that they were going to allow transfers to happen. And so ARIN does not demand that these old legacy registrations come back into the system and be returned. Instead, we allow them to transfer that address space to other organizations. And that was a decision the policy community made back at the end of the last decade.
Yeah. It's all good. It just comes down to get on the V6 bandwagon. If you haven't done so, you need to. End of story. There's no reason. I mean, with what I was just told, there is no reason for virtually any ISP not to be fully deploying IPv6, or at least starting on that right now.
Period.
And you're going to need it. you're going to have it eventually.
And also, just to reiterate one more time, even after we deplete the ARIN IPv4 free pool, we do have that /10 of IPv4 address space held in reserve that would allow a wireless ISP that is doing their IPv6 deployment that might just need a /24 to help them along on the IPv4 side. They would be able to come in and just and qualify for that directly from ARIN and receive that. But that's not going to be there forever, and they can only get up to a /24 once every 6 months if they can show that they qualify for it.
There you go.
Now, here's a question. So I'm all gung-ho for it, ISP. Don't know a whole lot about ARIN stuff. Are there folks out there that help shepherd you through the process of transferring? I imagine, Dennis, you're probably one of them. And what I mean by that is helping a person such as myself go through obtaining that address space from ARIN and deploying it, I need hand-holding here. Yes. And I'm sure there's other guys out there that do too.
So when it comes to requesting the resources directly from ARIN, so if you're requesting IPv4 address space that we have available in our free pool, or if you're requesting IPv6 address space that we have available, you can just go to the ARIN website and you can log in and you can request the resources yourself. It's a fairly straightforward process. And if you have trouble, you can call our help desk. We answer a help desk from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, and we can help work you through the process. That's not a problem at all. Now, if you're going to be transferring IPv4 address space from one organization to another, and you're looking for someone to help you out with that, we do have a specified transfer listing service where organizations who might facilitate that transaction between organizations can provide assistance to you. You can find information available on the ARIN website about that if you're interested in it, and it's also right there on that countdown page, a link to it. If you're looking for someone to actually help you with your IPv6 deployment itself, and you don't have the technical knowledge to do that, there are many individuals out there that I'm sure would be glad to help you that might be able to provide consulting services or other types of assistance if you need it.
Yeah, and just to go with that, my answer is obviously my organization, we do consulting for that. We have done all the way from, hey, I don't want to even know about ARIN, just get what I need. We file the proper organizational data, we create an org, we create POCs or use the existing ones. We basically do all the work that is very well documented. And I'm going to be very clear about this, is that all the policies and everything that you need is very well documented on the ARIN site. And if you have a question, you give them a call. They're very easy to work with. I've called them many times. But if you don't want to do all that, if you just want someone to handle it, I guarantee you that there's a number of consultants, myself included, that we do that work or will do that work for you so that you don't have to. As far as your deployment, as he said, that once you get assigned it, you're done. The deployment is really up to you and any consultant or people that you have working for you to get that deployment done.
Gotcha.
So, with that said, we're about out of time here. Richard, I want to thank you very, very much for coming in on our show. I know this show is going to be very popular because there's lots of really, really good information. And heck, I even learned something too, because I did not realize that that third requirement or third option for getting IPv6 space, which really makes it very easy for people to get started with V6. And just also keep this in mind, is as people are wanting to deploy V6, even if you're upstream, so let's say you go to Bell Canada or one of these guys that does not offer V6 peering as of yet, okay? There are other resources out there. Hurricane offers several V6 6-to-4 tunnels and things like that. That's not a long-term solution for you, but it will get you going, and it will get you starting to deploy. So it is important. There are ways to get around that. But also you banging on your upstream's door and upstream sales rep and saying, hey, I want a V6 peer with you is important, because that tells your upstream, if they don't already have V6, that you need V6. And maybe you're in one of their pilot programs or pilot deployments that helps you get V6 quicker and helps you service your customers quicker. So, Richard, do you have any other last words you'd like to toss out there?
Yeah, just a cap on the end there, exactly what you said. If you're an internet service provider and you have not started with your V6 deployment, you need to get started immediately. There are policies that allow to get that directly from the registry. Yes, we are depleting the IPv4 free pool this summer, and you will no longer be able to get IPv4 directly from ARIN other than requesting under that transition policy for IPv6 where you can get up to a /24 every 6 months from this reserve /10 that we have. And of course, if you still do need IPv4 after that in quantities higher than that, you can make use of the transfer policies that we have here in the ARIN organization. And if anyone has any questions about that, they can find information at ARIN.net about what's going on and find the status and get additional information. Or if you're requesting resources or you need help, you can always contact us at our help desk, and those numbers are published on the ARIN website.
Well, I want to thank Richard Jimmerson with ARIN. He's the Chief Information Officer over there, and he's really shed some light for me. Like I've been talking with Dennis before, I really need to hop on this bandwagon myself, just one, to get off of a double NAT, but also to modernize my network. Dennis, you got anything else?
I think we're good, bud.
All right. Well, thanks again, Richard. We appreciate you being on the show, and hopefully maybe get you on the show further down the road when IPv6 is more common, if you will.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much, Dennis.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to ISP Radio. We hope you've gained new insights and additional wisdom in our industry as well as your business. Please remember to visit our show sponsors via the links on ispradio.com. If you're interested in becoming a show sponsor, contact us at sales@ispradio.com. Now go out there and push those packets as fast as you can. Good luck and Godspeed.